everybody, and welcome to another Tuesday night in the Spotlight. Tonight, I have joining me Aoife Anastasia, who is an esoteric artist, performer, and ritual theater maker, who, for the last few decades, has been living and performing on stages across the UK. But thanks to a random twist of fate, she is currently grounded with her family in Ontario, Canada. Alongside her performing career, Aoife has completed her first occult musical based on the Elusian Mysteries, now in development. She is directing a series of plays and site-specific readings based on the work of her great uncle T.H.Nally Abbey, theater, playwright, and personal friend of the great poet W.B. Yeats. She is a psychic medium, seer, trance channel, and occasional oracle, priestess trained in the Elusian and Egyptian mystery traditions, practitioner of ritual and planetary magic, workshop leader and celebrant of traditional Celtic Wheel of the Year ceremonies, landscape communicator, and teacher of remote viewing, psychic development, and immersive astrology. Aoife will be reading some experts and chatting about her current project, Drawing Strength, which is a channeled visual art, spoken word, creative nonfiction exploration of the lives of great artists and how their grit and resilience can inspire us all in times of great uncertainty. So thank you so much, Aoife, for joining us here tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So can you tell me a little bit more about what it means for drawing strength?
Yeah, I didn't know when I began this project how relevant, more and more relevant it would become as time went on. I mean, I had a strange feeling, like it was like building an ark for a great flood. I get those sort of feelings sometimes.
Yeah.
I really didn't realize how relevant it would be for more people than myself.
Mm.
Basically, the origin of the project, when I was writing my occult musical in the Elusian Mysteries, it's a lot about facing death and the mystery of death and embracing death in your life so that you can live fuller and stronger. And the partner and collaborator I was writing with, a brilliant young composer, Frida Kahlo, we really went deep into the magic and the mythology and the mystery and Hades and Persephone and the seasons and coming of age and all that gorgeousness. And we really became incredibly deeply connected in the story and in the work, and his music and my words. It was very, very intimate connection and a magical connection. You could say we walked the mysteries together. We were in this very deep rite. And as we came to the end of the piece, it ended with a hymn, basically with the joy of living and never to fear death, and to keep on living no matter what season you're in, that spring will always follow winter, and a gorgeous piece of music. And unfortunately, the night he completed the last note of our musical, he passed away in the night at 31 years old. And it was just such shock, such a massive loss. And I had seen my whole life mapped out in front of me, like, okay, we're going to write forever, we're going to be superstars on Broadway, we're going to take London by storm. All my dreams were pinned on this incredible, fulfilling collaboration, and he left us so suddenly, so young. And because we were in this very deep connection and sort of deep magic, I went into grief plus, and it was sort of the first significant death in my life beyond the ordinary timed deaths of grandparents in their time and aunts and uncles you didn't know so well, and the sort of normal way that grief sneaks into your life. This was very shocking and very, very whole. I felt very much torn in half, like it was so shocking. So to survive what I didn't know was very dramatic post-traumatic stress. I didn't have a word for it. And survivor's grief as well, and survivor's guilt. I didn't, I was like, why did they take the Orpheus? They should have taken the Eurydice, or, it was such a strange, strangely times coincidental, synchronistic event. So to survive that first year, I really lost all faith in religion, and a lot of my spiritual practices went out the window, and my belief in angels and gods and everything just kind of unraveled, and I was left with very little. And I remember I couldn't really see color or hear music very well. And and there was this, giant shaped hole where he was. And I thought, I'm going to need company. What do I still believe in? And music crept in, and art was still lingering around, and creativity I could still believe in. And I thought, how do like I thought of like Pablo Picasso, say, who saw his best friend um, shot himself in the head in a bordello, and Picasso painted in blue for 3 years. Or Frida Kahlo was hit by a tram and her body was torn apart, and all she could do is pick up the brush and paint herself. So I was like, how do you turn this emptiness into creativity? How do you use creativity to heal yourself? So I picked up a pen, and I'm not a particularly gifted drawer. I wasn't then. I had a Sharpie and I had a piece of paper, and I was lonely. So I drew a picture of Frida Kahlo, who is kind of the queen of pain. Like she took on so much pain, and actually had a way of falling in love with her pain and falling in love with death. And she's a miraculous saint, really, of death. So I drew her and put her on my wall to sort of talk to her for the day. And she kind of literally showed up. She walked into my life, and I would draw at night because I had an extreme problem sleeping. I had night terrors, and so the body was under so much stress that I would draw most of the night. So I would draw these artists in the night, and in the daytime they would walk with me and spend the day with me and talk with me. Or, sometimes they'd be really close and I'd see the world through their eyes, or hear their music in the world, or we would go on walks and talks. Just, they kept me moving through the world in a year when I just needed to live day to day, to be honest. I didn't really know why or how to live. So they came with, and as I drew them, I was drawing strength. That's why I started calling it that. And I never intended on sharing it. I didn't know how many, like, they just kept showing up. Sunset every evening, someone would walk in and I'm like, oh, it's T.S. Eliot. Okay, we're doing that. Some of these artists I didn't know particularly well, but I knew them very well by the end of the day. And each one of them just dropped in, just like one little thing to keep me going. And I ended up doing 366. So I did a year and a day of this. And my drawing got considerably better. Like, I was like, the first one's pretty bad. It's pretty primitive. I'm like, damn it, it's Frida. She deserves better than that. But I ended with Picasso because he is sort of the patron, the father of the project, being his blue period. And the last drawing is quite three-dimensional and extraordinary for me to look. I'm like, how did I get there from there? And amazingly, my ability to see color kind of came back little by little, and the drawings get more colorful and they get more skilled. And I'm putting everything into the drawing. They're channeled drawings. So the people that have seen or felt the artwork, there's definitely an embedded energy. And so I've been writing this book when I got to the end, I'm like, if this could help one other person who's walking this path, who just needs to get through another day, who's depressed or stuck or scared or anything, then I need to put it out there. And the powers that be, the artists themselves are still a presence in my life and would like to help people. So I'm looking back at those diaries now, which are sparse and not entirely coherent, but the days are captured in a few words. So now I'm taking those experiences and expanding and really digging in to find what was that strength, and what can that artist give to you. And they're amazing. Like, they're any artist from any medium, any era, any country. I have Dolly Parton one day, and Aesop, the fable teller from ancient Greece, the next. I might have Elvis next to Emily Dickinson. Like, it was just a crazy circus of artists. And it was just amazing who shows up when you need the most. Like, my soul called out to these particular creative people to come, and I was so surprised by half of them. Like, wow. Some of them are alive, and their music came to me, or a book they wrote came to me, and it wasn't so literal sometimes, but often it was very real, very real. T.S. Eliot shows up, I'm like, okay, we're going to see cats. We're going to a matinee. Get your bowler hat and let's do this, T.S. So I ended up having some pretty fascinating synchronicity, some amazing adventures, and some really hard days where, they had to do whatever I was doing. So, they came to grief therapy, they stayed in bed with me, whatever happened. And I had these amazing friends. And whether you believe in channeling or mediumship, or whether you think it's my imagination or my psyche trying to protect and heal itself, I don't really mind. To me, it was, I say I was in a state of grace. So I was like so broken wide open that there was nothing to get in the way of these incredible guests, I guess you call them.
And I think what's really beautiful about that is all throughout time, humans have experienced grief. It is like the only emotion that I think we all know at some point in time throughout our lives. And it's what ties us all together.
You
know?
The inevitable. Yeah.
Exactly. So the way you've drawn on that strength, that, and I love that, how it started was so kind of fragile, and I haven't seen your drawing yet, actually. But I'm like, I really want to see this book when it's done, to see kind of the capture of this is that moment of pain, and then what it becomes, because that's also a huge part of all of our journeys. Is it starts off messy, it starts off completely imperfect, and then it gets, over time, it starts to perfect itself.
And it's still perfecting. Like, as I'm revisiting, rewriting, and they're coming back in, I'm getting another layer and another level and another revelation. It's kind of astounding. And I'm just like, will this book ever end? It's huge. So this is why I'm doing some performances of the chapters as theatrical pieces, so that I can start getting it out there before it's completely written, because that's essentially 366 chapters and I'm at 70 written. So it's like, I got to start sharing this, because we all need this. Like, you think of someone like, I was writing about Joni Mitchell the other day, and of course she was in quarantine as a 10-year-old, polio epidemic, and her coming right now, again, revisiting. I'm like, even though she's still alive and with us, her 10-year-old came to visit me in her mask. And it was like, that is so interesting. And she's talking about how she brought herself out of quarantine, saved her own life, and how she lost her faith in God and prayed to a Christmas tree and went, at 10 years old, went, dear Christmas tree, if you can save my legs so I can walk, I will sing for you and God for the rest of my life, and you're like, this child. And she always says that this pandemic was this mystical gift that keeps teaching her throughout her life. And I like, we need that now. Now is when we need to hear that. That's amazing,
Absolutely. And I just find that so interesting.
It's
so very interesting, because it's not like this is the first time we've ever experienced a pandemic.
No.
It's come up throughout history, and yet it's the first time we've experienced it. Well, I guess not even all of us. Some of us have experienced one before.
Past lives and all. Yeah. And there's going to be this like incredible collective trauma at the end of this. I say that like it's going to end, like a bell's going to ring and we're going to say it's over. Just kidding. Like, it's going to be years and years of rebalancing, but we're all going to have lost something. We're never going back to the world we had before. We're going to be sharing a grief in a very real way for the first time in a very long time. So I'm hoping that maybe a word or two can help people redefine, and find creativity again, especially with the arts in such peril. Like my theatrical career, who knows? My counseling, my workshops I was running, like, who can say? I mean, we're being, right now we're reaching people, but such a frightening thought. You could sit and grieve, or you could be resilient and creative and adaptable and find a way to keep reaching out. So it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating to me.
Absolutely. And I think an important part that you drew on at the very beginning of that was when you first started and you're in that moment of such deep grief and you grabbed your Sharpie and you grabbed your piece of paper,
Yeah.
it wasn't to make art be perfection. It was simply to just get those emotions out. And I feel like as humans, a lot of times we think we have to create to make something that's perfect. So we might say, I'm not that creative of a person. I can't even draw a stick person or whatever. So can you elaborate a little bit on how you were able to kind of go in the flow of the creativity that was trying to come out?
Well, I mean, I was lucky in a way that I had nothing to get in the way. I had very little personality in the way, very little ego. I was pretty much destroyed,
Yeah.
uh, my life had shattered. And, the night he died, the message I got from spirit, which Frida Kahlo really likes to sort of echo, because she talks about her tram accident when she was literally physically split open. But this voice came that first night I was trying to sleep, and it said, grief is like a black rose stabbed into the center of your heart, and it's going to open very, very slowly,
Mm,
and it's going to crack you open,
mm,
and stretch and stretch and stretch, and eventually the petals will fall off, but it will leave you more open, and more open to receive and give love than you've ever been opened before. And that was my message from spirit, and that sent me to sleep in that first moment of shock.
yeah.
And that is like a Frida Kahlo painting, isn't it? Like this sort of yeah, almost like a saint, like I felt my rib cage was absolutely cracked open.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, how would another person who maybe isn't in that extreme level of grief, how would they do that? And I think that's right. I did it for myself. It was never meant to be shared. I honestly did it for company. I just needed a face to look at. I put it
Mm,
on the empty space in the wall or behind the chair where he used to sit, because I just needed someone to talk to. So it was kind of that.
okay.
It was kind of that basic. So I was really reduced to very little. But I think it's just, if anyone does want to get through to that state, it's just about permission. And even if you burn it, throw it away, it's the act of doing it that counts. And it's, if you let go of the outcome, or put it away for a while and come back and look at it. But I am an artist in other ways, and I kind of know that your voice is your voice and your hand is your hand, and only you can draw that thing. And even
Mm,
if you don't like it, it's still a work of art if it's authentic and comes from the source of you. Like, and I had an enlightened art teacher who's like, you're legitimate, you're primitive, and it's, it's not refined, but that, look at Rousseau, look at Miro. And she showed me all these artists who weren't great at draftsmanship and perspective and perfect details. Not everyone can be Michelangelo, but she's like, you're legitimate. That's your voice coming out of your
mm.
hand. So I was really blessed with a very enlightened teacher. So I don't tend to judge myself on artwork. I'm allowed to play, but I gave myself permission. So you really do have to maybe even sign a permission form. You're allowed to make a mess. You're allowed to suck. Just do it. Like, doesn't matter.
Absolutely. And I think it's something that so many people need to delve more into with
Yeah.
the arts and all forms of arts, whether it's
Yeah.
music or dancing or performing or drawing or creating something,
Yeah.
because that's our natural state in my
Yeah, of course. I get some flack because I work in many mediums. Like, I'm on stage, I'm a photographer, I'm a drawing, I'm writing, I'm doing like a million different forms of creativity. But I always say, like, it's just one thing. It's storytelling, but with just different mediums. And it's like a tree, right? So the trunk of the tree is storytelling with good roots in authenticity and living my best life. And then the branches, I can do lots of different branches if I'm solid in the center and in myself, and yeah, just sharing what I am meant to share. No one else can do that.
exactly.
You know, it's weird to share this project. People could say, oh my God, you were insane. You're talking to dead people. What the hell? You know, like it could get really hugely judged on what is a very vulnerable project, bringing it into the world. And I'm genuinely scared that, you know, it puts me, I'm going to be wide open, naked rib cage with this thing. You know, I'm like, should I do it anonymously? Should I just not do it? You know, like I'm scared every day, but that means it's worth it, I think.
Absolutely. Because
Yeah.
to me, if you're not fearful or feeling fear in regards to a project or putting yourself out there, even having a conversation with someone, then your soul's not growing.
Yeah. And my artists will show you, like all of them were terrified. They all struggled with creation versus destruction within themselves. Some of them didn't beat that demon. I had a sort of a message last night. I was thinking about creativity and how each artist to recreate themselves kind of comes to a point of death, like psychological death, where they have to grow, evolve, change, find a new way to paint, find a new way to write, or they literally die. And we've lost a lot of artists so young because they can't handle that destructive urge that lives within the creative. I thought that was so fascinating. That just came out of nowhere last night. I'm like, because maybe it's Dylan Thomas's birthday and he didn't beat the demon on that one, I'm afraid. But beautiful soul and good company. In my friends say they need a dictionary because I'm naming so many artists all the time because I walk with a large pantheon and they're like, Jesus, I need a dictionary.
Well, I'm thinking the same thing. I'm like, some of the names you're saying, I'm like, never heard of them. Never heard of them. No, it's not something to apologize for because you're actually opening up the door for me to learn more, you know?
Yeah. And I don't think the way I've written it, you can Wikipedia a few lines if you need to know who they are, but it really shouldn't matter because what they have to say comes through. They're very short and it's just, people say they know them by the end, even if they hadn't known them before that. So I've had some lovely reactions. Yeah.
Beautiful. Now, did you want to read an excerpt from?
Yeah, sure. I have a few, depends what mood we're in. It's a good night for stories because it's cold and wet. Let me see. Yeah. Okay. I'll read this one because I think most people grew up with fairy tales, right?
Yeah.
So most people grew up with the Brothers Grimm, right? Now, if you don't know them personally, you don't think like someone had to write these, or you think maybe they came up with the story themselves, but actually they were these two brothers, Wilhelm and Jakob. And just when that old pagan religion was dying out, they traveled the German countryside and found the old peasant women on stoops of old cottages. And they didn't write the stories. They collected them from the wise women and from the old men on stoops. And the stories we have now, the Disney, the Cinderella, the Snow White, all of that have been so made clean and shiny by Disney. And they, to a certain extent, made the pagan tales a little more shiny and Christian as well. But they were great collectors. I didn't know that before I met them. And they're lovely. They're lovely. Actually, didn't really want to talk so much as listen. So it was like, oh, okay. So the day I met them was day 77. So each artist is a day. I spent a day. So each, sunset, I get a new person. So this was day 77. So what is that? About 3 months ish. And obviously I was still having a lot of trouble with post-traumatic stress and sleep issues. So I was sent to a sleep clinic to be, wires and machines, and they go bing. So this is my evening with the Brothers Grimm.
Awesome.
Okay. I found myself not in a bower covered in ivy and roses, chiffon wafting in the scented air, but covered in wire, pads, and jellies, plugged into a forest of intimidating machines at the local sleep clinic. It had been months of insomnia and petrifying night terrors, the post-traumatic stress working its way out in my sleep. Apollo, young and healthy, had died of respiratory failure in the night, and I hadn't felt safe to sleep since. Hooked in and strapped down, I had nothing to do but wait and hope that sleep would come at all. Beside me, at odds with the night vision cameras and the EKG monitors, sat two kindly young men in brocade waistcoats and cheerful silk cravats, and they were a burst of color in the sterile lab. I wondered what the technicians behind the two-way mirror would think of my overnight guests, Jakob and Wilhelm Grimm. They sat poised with their pens over their parchment, with kindly, serene smiles, waiting for me to speak. These collectors of tales, always ready to record. We had hours to kill and their inkwells were full. So I decided to start my fairy tale in the best way I knew how. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful princess who loved sleep. Every night she would climb on top of her many fine mattresses and snuggle down into her fluffiest blankets, and sleep would slip into the bed beside her. Sleep would lay her head on the princess's chest and brush her eyelids with her feathery fingers until they both drifted off, curled up and happy and content until the morning. One night the princess had climbed up and snuggled in, and sleep was nowhere to be found. She tore apart the covers and threw the blankets aside, but there was no sign of sleep anywhere. She sat up bothered and bleary-eyed until morning, wondering where sleep had gone. At dawn, an alarm was raised. Apollo, the court composer, and her dearest friend had stopped breathing in the night and was found still in his bed. The princess, in a fit of grief, thought at once it must have been sleep that had stolen his breath away. She swore never to let sleep near her again. That night, when the court had settled in and the mattresses were climbed and the blankets were fluffed, sleep lifted the sheet to slip in beside her. The princess started to ring bells, kicking and screaming, sounding the alarm and sending sleep away. Sleep, shocked, slunk away from her room and went to pester the night watchmen at their posts instead. The next night, the same yells and bells, and sleep defeated. Weeks passed and the princess grew pale, but somehow more determined. Sleep no longer visited the castle. At night, the dogs in the yard paced and whined. Pigeons in the eaves cooed restlessly. Even the flags on the parapets rustled in the still night air. The king and queen grew cranky and fatigued. 77 days had passed, and the frazzled princess, so afraid of having her breath taken away, banned sleep from the kingdom forever. No one was able to shut their eyes. Babies cried all night. Couples fought in bed. Students in libraries actually studied. Everyone was on the verge of collapse. The king and queen called out to a neighboring castle for help. Luckily, a skilled conjurer heard their distress and came up with a brilliant plan to help the sleepless monarchs. He had a very special machine, he explained to the princess, in which she could spend the night, and when sleep came to greet her, he would watch and sound the alarm if sleep tried to take her breath away. You must look sleep in the eye and ask her why she took your friend, he insisted. Then we can all get some rest. She reluctantly agreed and climbed onto the thin single mattress and covered herself with the rough, narrow blanket, while he attached many wires and pads to her chest, eyes, hands, and feet. He set the alarms on the magic machine to full and watched and waited for sleep to come. Before long, sleep approached her sheepishly. Why have you taken my friend away? The princess demanded to know. Where have you taken Apollo? I was with him the other night, said Sleep shyly, but I don't have him now. I delivered him to my sister Death. Let me introduce you and we can ask her where he is. She clicked her fingers and a small, efficient figure with dark hair and thick glasses approached with a clipboard. A few red lights lit on the conjurer's magic machine, but no alarm sounded. Yes, said Death, I did collect him as scheduled, but I don't have him now. I delivered him to... She paused as she shuffled through her papers on her clipboard. Our sister Dreams. She clicked her fingers. Let me introduce you, and you can ask her where he is. A tall, willowy girl with white hair and diamante hair clips floated into the room, with a shadowy figure lingering just behind her. I have him, as delivered. He's with me now, and you can see him when death and sleep allow. The other two sisters nodded in agreement. The princess suddenly recognized the figure behind her and knew it had to be Apollo. She lurched forward to embrace him when all the alarms on the magic machine started to ring out and the conjurer prepared to wake the princess. She was slipping back into consciousness and away from Apollo and the sisters' sleep, death, and dreams. She heard dreams call out, "Now you have met us sisters three. In your dreams, your friend will see." The princess awoke with a start and pulled off the wires, leapt out of the bed and ran back into her castle in time for the sunset. She climbed up on the mattresses and dove under the blankets and waited for sisters' sleep, less afraid of death and thankful for dreams. I awoke to the sound of Jacob scratching the last sentence on a parchment with relish. I must have been drifting off. Somehow I'd managed to tangle my wires and set off some alarm on the machinery. A technician was speaking over the intercom, and the brothers were starting to fade in the morning light, and were waiting for an ending. I wish I could have said, "And she slept happily ever after," but to be honest, it would be months before that were true.
Beautiful. I felt like a child again listening to a story there. I just loved that.
For tonight, because it's so cold.
And it captures so much of that emotion and even bringing that understanding to the insomnia.
And they see how they translated, like, my world became theirs for the day. I mean, that's just how it was. I would, I became whoever came in. I like saw how they saw, I thought how they thought. Sometimes I would chat with them literally, but a lot of the time it was just like I'd walk through their world.
Mm.
And it's like indescribable. And that could have been a really horrible event. Sleep clinics are really stressful and scary. And you have people staring through these windows. And, I kept waking in the night thinking I would stop breathing too. At the same time he died, I would wake up 3:40. It was, yeah. They gave my psyche, they gave my soul that story, saying, you could see him in sleep. If you're not afraid of death and you can go to sleep, then dreams will gift you a visit from this person that you love. I'm like, how kind is that? Like the compassion these artists brought, I was like, oh, so blessed in that time,
Yeah. And can I just point out too what magic you actually tapped into there with really all of it, because the journey through grief is such an in-depth journey. It's not like getting over a relationship or something where you can do it in a month or two or whatever. It's a lifetime process. And to document it every day for 366 days, that's beautiful. But to also create these stories around it so other people can see, and they don't even have to read it like day 1, day 2, day 3, but they can pick it up at whatever place they're at and just kind of open up to see what message is spirit or the universe, whatever we want to call it, wanting to share with them that day, to give them that bit of company.
Yeah, the people who I have some people reading it just to help me, in the marathon writing race I'm in. And a lot of people find it has an impact, and they kind of can read one a week and just want to sit with them, and they want to meet the brothers themselves or want to reflect on the story. And I had another person who read 12 in a day and he just devoured it. But it just depends where you're at and some people want to know the artist better, and the conscious mind comes in and they go, "Oh, I want to look at the paintings, I want to listen to the music." And I'm like, great, absolutely. Or talk to me, because I love every single one of these crazy artists. And I will be doing some workshops and podcasts on it, because the research and the joy, because that was the one day I spent, but since then they still stay in my life. So I want to paint with Van Gogh, I want to sculpt with Rodin, I want to hang out with these guys, and they become such an intimate part of me that I forget that I didn't know them in life. They're just part in my molecules now. Like they really did rebuild my soul. And what spirits say in writing this book, it's very painful to write, because I have to go back to some really like raw places. And early on when I was writing, I kept re-traumatizing myself. And they just keep saying, like, every chapter you write, every story you finish is a brick off your back. Like they're making me process it all over again.
Yeah.
And it was years ago now, so I'm strong enough to write it because there's some time passed, but at the same time, they're making me do the hard work on behalf of myself and whoever will take part in this. So yeah, so I need to share it so I can keep going. And I don't recommend anyone read day one first, because like the first 31 days are pretty intense. So,
but you know, for someone who is going through a very brand new grief,
yeah,
that might be the only part they can actually resonate with.
there's a lot of incoherence.
Yeah. And that's okay too. You know, it's, to me, it's, yeah.
Yeah.
Because there is no words for that period of time. What are
Yeah.
you feeling? Everything, nothing, you know, it's.
And I found that like this grief was one thing, but when this grief opened up, every other grief I'd had opened up at the same time. It's like all my wounds opened up. And I was like, oh, everything's on the table. Oh, I'm just an open wound. Oh my God. You know, how could you know that would happen?
Yeah.
I have another artist that could show some contrast. Do you want to hear another?
Sure. Yeah.
Just to show you like a little further in day, let's see. So just to show you like how different a day can be, Hildegard von Bingen, who's a mystic from the 1100s. So you can see like, we've got 17 whatever, and now we've got 1100s. And she was a healer. She was a mother superior. I'm not sure. She was an abbess probably. She wrote incredible mystical music. She had visions and she did these beautiful paintings of seraphim and gorgeousness. Yeah, so she came in with a very different mystical energy. And she came in for the first funeral I went to that wasn't his funeral. So it was the first after the first, you know, which is a threshold you wouldn't see coming necessarily. I'm like, you know, it was a friend of a friend's funeral. I didn't even think, but of course I had to relive again. It took me right back to that more recent grief.
Yeah.
So if you can picture, I do have a copy of the artwork, and I tell you, it's very crude, but I thought I'd show. This was my drawing of this saint. So you see, it's just a Sharpie on paper.
It's fantastic, though.
I was pretending to do a woodcut in my mind, but there's the alchemy, there's her herbs and her healing, and she has her book of music and her scripture. And so, you know, it gives you an idea, like it's nothing fancy. It was just what I could do in the time I had and the energy I had. Because those of you who've lost people know that physical fatigue is a big part of grief, right? It's like, I can lift a pencil today. Yay. You know, like
huge. It's huge though.
Huge. Washing and eating is like bonus. You know? So, but if you'll allow, she's very,
absolutely.
I think her energy is extraordinary. I love her to bits. This is day 221 out of 366. So you see, it's into the winter. The seasons have passed a bit. Let's see if you can hear her voice in here. Oh, my virgin heart, how like first death is to first love. It takes you over an inevitable threshold that cannot be uncrossed, and you are opened in ways you can never anticipate. You walk in the world a little wiser, a little warier, with a sense of wonder you've never known before. You are touched forever, and loss lives in you from that day forth. If you have lost, then you must have truly loved. Mother walked into my room, holding out a long dress of woven black linen, its shapeless form swallowing the light around it, a perfect shroud for a day of mourning. The sun shone down its living glory and illuminated the many sorrows of the world. And I, a mere woman, tell you this. In the chill of that midwinter's morning, I reached for that dark cloth to cover my head. Hildegard had come in the night, a shining beacon in the shadow of death, a slight figure with eyes of sapphire in an enormous golden orb that burned in my eyes like the sun. She wore music on her heart, a shining breastplate which dazzled my senses. I felt in her such fire, inextinguishable, unfathomable, fully alive and filled with mystical inspiration. Her flame colored the air. And I, neither ablaze with the strength of lions nor learned in their exaltations, could only watch amazed. Her namesake, a family friend, Hilda, had died Christmas Eve, and she charged me to go to the service the next day. I hadn't been to a funeral since we buried Apollo so many months ago, and my gut was in agony. The churning dread of reliving that day was inevitable. Your first after your first is another first and cannot be avoided. Would I be mourning for Hilda at all, or tapping into my own fresh well of sorrow? I burrowed into my billowing sackcloth under the fluorescent lights, trying to hide on the wooden pew at odds with the plastic stained glass and the whining electric organ. The next service pushing in, a busy season for the bustling funeral parlor. And it was all over so quickly. The rites were read, speeches made, sandwiches eaten, tea was poured, and hands were shook. This enormous thing was happening, and it all seemed terribly mundane. Then I saw the son of Hilda, standing alone after the reception line, a small and insignificant figure, very much an orphan, naked in grief, crumpled in defeat. I was amazed he could hold himself up. And I say to you, in the past, I would have patted his shoulder and offered a warm, well-meaning smile, given him some half platitude about better places among the angels, or still with us in a way. Maybe in the innocence of my girlish ignorance, offered him a herbal remedy or something that would have made me feel better for being of use. But in that moment, I was overcome by an enormous empathy. For the first time, he and I were one in this. As I approached him, all my words, all sound, all force, all breath left me, and I had nothing to say. My heart filled with a shining fire, delightful red. Me, a faint-hearted woman, pulled him to me in what felt like a winged embrace, a life force found only within the mystery of death. Good, whole, and beyond the beginning of time flowed through me. This was something I could give, something I finally understood. My loss joined with him and was uplifted through us in this glorious antiphony. We connected into something so much deeper, so much larger than death. We were wrapped in an incredible healing fire, something made of music and light. My sorrow reached out and gave him permission to express his own. He softened in my arms, and I held him until he melted into tears. I stood with him in silence until the singing began in the chapel for the next soul passing through. It was then I heard Hildegard's voice singing in my ear. Listen now, and I will tell you. That which has been taken from you has given you so much more than you can ever give. A fire of love inextinguishable. You have pierced the darkness with your spark of life. Go forth into the world wounded, that you may know the wounded and teach them to know themselves. I walked away from the chapel into the glistening snow, ringing like a new struck bell.
Beautiful.
Very different day.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And yet still so relevant. You speak with such a way that you can picture it so clearly in your mind. Um, and then when you were talking about these things that you could have said to him,
We all do that.
he's in a better place. You know, it's stuff that we all hear.
Yeah.
You know, and it's said to be helpful,
Yeah.
but it's not always helpful. And I've been one of those people
Me
who has
too.
said these not helpful things.
But she's with you. Why are you sad? And I'm like, oh, I'll never say that again. When you feel the absence, it
Yeah.
may be true on a level, but
Yeah.
until you're able to feel them with you, that's a horrible thing to say. Like, I just like wanted to go to everyone I'd said, you know, or didn't understand or ran away from when they were in grief and apologize. But you know, it's innocence. You can't know until you know. Like it's a threshold that needs to be crossed. It was such a shock, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, and you see how different each day is, and just like, Dolly Parton Day is nothing like that.
I can just imagine what Dolly Parton Day is like.
Big hair, sequins, living your best life. It's pretty fun. Like, there were fun days as well, and some kind of horrible days, but like, yeah. I just thought for a cold November night. And her language sneaks in like that when she's saying, "I am your woman," and "I say to you." That's like her medieval cadence. Her voice snuck into mine. Like, it was really interesting writing with her. She was actually very clever. She was writing to popes and kings and writing this sort of false modesty, saying, "Oh, I am your woman," has had a vision of the angels, like just fabulously clever, wonderfully warm. And I say to everyone who asks me, like, how did these people come? And I'm like, it's love. Like, I love them first. My heart beacon has reached out, and these are the energies that answered. And I think now maybe I would get different artists now, or maybe I'd get a different response. But it was just a raw heart calling out for help to whoever would come to heal. And it was like, yeah, I'm here today. Like, it was hit and miss there. So yeah, color me
I
great.
think that's beautiful. And
Yeah.
it's something that's available to everybody.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
I encourage people to find their own saints or artists or their own inspiration and talk to them. I don't think there's anything in the universe you can't converse with. I think everything has consciousness, everything's alive in its own way.
yeah.
And if you're patient enough to listen, and if you do it with love, you're most likely to get an answer.
Absolutely. Now, because I realized, like, on that first day, you were really in that kind of place of pain.
Mm.
So the second day,
Yeah.
did you then kind of go, oh, that was something yesterday and I'm going to try that again today? Or how did it become something that every day you were showing up and having someone new show up?
Yeah. Because of course I didn't expect them to actually show up. I don't know what I was doing. Yeah, I mean, I guess some part of me took over and just drew again.
Okay.
Um, and a lot of the first diaries are hard to decipher and really incoherent. And there is some revisiting of them now to ask what happened then, because it is like the fact that I even kept a diary was kind of incredible, even in point form. And it was usually a list of what hurt and I couldn't walk and did I eat today. Like, it was pretty primitive. I didn't know I would go that long. I didn't know I was in a thing or a process. I wouldn't have thought that far. I was honestly pretty much one day to the next. I couldn't leave the house, could rarely leave the bed. So drawing was pretty good. And even though they were primitive and kind of awful, the first drawings, they still took me a long time. So it was kind of just an occupation, and the hand kind of drew itself, luckily. And then it got like a great excuse also to listen to their music for that day, or watch a documentary, or because I wasn't really able to function in the world too well. So it was also a nice way to curate my digital life as well, and try having a day on Facebook with George Orwell, who's like, Big Brother's watching you. I was like, that was awkward, but yeah. So I didn't really know I was in a thing until about 21 days in. I'm like, oh, I'm still doing this. Oh, this is interesting. Is this going to go on for long? Maybe it's a month long, maybe. And my wall was filling up. Like, it was really compelling to, I called it my wall of heroes. And on the 31st day, I drew Apollo, I drew Fergal himself, and I drew myself on my birthday. So
Beautiful.
they're about A4, right? And my kitchen is, pretty big for a London kitchen. But I think just the fact that color was filling the walls in these tiles and all these faces were looking down on me, that was probably really what kept me going. Because it was like I had someone to eat with. It was pretty basic.
Yeah.
Nice people smiling at me. Yeah, it was really filling the hole. So that wasn't that difficult to keep going. And when life slowly came in, it was very interesting to take them into life. And I was doing auditions, like, I don't know how I did auditions, but I meant like taking them in with me, and job interviews, and And then nearer to the end, when I'm getting a little stronger, we're doing things on purpose, like visiting their homes or going to a gallery. And, Vincent wants to check out his sunflowers at the National Gallery and see what all the fuss is about. The man who never sold a painting, and he's seeing t-shirts and tote bags, like such a weird idea. So, it became a reason to keep going. And I was sharing them online and with friends. So I was getting encouragement from my community as well. And a lot of people didn't know how to reach out to me because, he wasn't a husband, he wasn't a partner, he was a collaborator, and we worked, on this thing that no one had ever heard. I didn't have a title for what I'd lost. So it was a way they could join in and support. And I was in a pretty scary state. Like, I actually lost friends I never got back because I went pretty feral. So I have people I've never seen since who probably don't want to see my face again. That's okay. And actually, it's T.S. Eliot talking about cats and, Grisabella, this cat in Cats, who's rejected by the other cats because she has that smell of loss and death on her. And she's eventually accepted. And I'm like, that was me up there. Nobody wants to touch you when you have that smell of grief, or you feel that. It's not always true.
Yeah.
But you feel ostracized and rejected. And I was in showbiz, and fair weather friends who've done a show with you once don't really want to see the ugly bit, where you're like in this inexplicable ugliness, rawness, confusion state of disarray. That's what it was.
God. And can I just say, I love that on your birthday you drew yourself.
I know, and that was kind of, I was like, I made a point of it, and I celebrated myself, and I spent the day with myself, and that in a state of grief also is pretty. That was like I'd say day 99-ish.
Okay.
And you don't necessarily want to be with yourself when you're a mess, do you? But I
usually you try and check out in some way or another.
Like, can I be with any other artist but me? And I put flowers in my hair. I treated myself very well. Actually, I did very well. That was a big healing day. And actually, the last day was funny because I could have gone on for years. I love artists, and I want to know every artist in the world. And Picasso, kind of the big daddy of artists, was kind of like, okay, but we stop now. I was the patron of this project. And he says, now you're your own artist of the day, every day, All right, okay, I'm released. Okay, I'll put down the pen. I'm putting it down. But now I have to write this. It's profound. And I've become an artist since, really, in such a profound way. And, I've been speaking to mental health professionals about this. I was in a process. I had help. I think if you are in that state, get professional help as well. Creativity does a good chunk of it, but you also need to be checked in on. And it was fun to watch them watch that, and my psyche was saving itself by having a conversation with facets of itself through the faces of these artists. Like, no one said I was mad. They were like, you're imaginative. And for us that do speak to invisible friends, we have a different understanding of that. But it was fun to watch the I had a very good therapist who was like, yes, William Blake is absolutely beside you today. Does he want to talk to us? I wouldn't have, I also reached out for more conventional help as well. And it's amazing to look back, actually. And again, I'm hoping, again, when I share these, that people find their own artists and give themselves permission and discover what they like. And actually, when you look at the artists who've inspired you throughout your life, or like authors, music you like, it tells you a lot about yourself, actually. When you reflect on their personalities, like, you see patterns emerging when you do enough artists.
I'm thinking, I don't know.
You get kind of a flavor for, I like the amount of maybe because I'm in musical theater, but New York Jewish men, homosexual New York Jewish men. I'm in musical theater, and they're all geniuses in living in New York. Amazing. I'm like, wow, they were my heroes as a girl. Like, other people love pop stars. I'm like, how can I relate to these guys? Sondheim was my pop star. I think that's hilarious. But it's great. It's great. And I'm like, yeah, I have a lot of that. And I have a lot of loads of women of color. That's fantastic. And then some people who are maybe a little more less accepted nowadays because they've done naughty things since. And it's like how to work with difficult artists like that may have lived more raucous lives, you know?
Mm-hmm. Now, when you were doing these writings, was there anything that you discovered about yourself? So, just talking about these different personalities coming in and stuff, was there anything that came out or that you learned about yourself that you were like, wow, I didn't even recognize this or realize this about myself or where I'm at?
Oh God, well, constantly. I'm just trying to think of one I could share with you because I'm like, every day seemed like a revelation. There were some that were really challenging that showed shadow aspects.
Okay.
And some that were like, ugh. There's one mystery writer, Patricia Highsmith, who writes like Strangers on a Train. She wrote a lot of murder mysteries, and she kind of allowed me to want to kill everyone that day, and actually kind of plot how I was going to murder them because I was so angry at the world for not having lost anyone, and like, why do you get to live when he's dead? You know, and I got to be like really horrible that day. But in my imagination with her, in my dialogue, were like how we would kill them, where we would bury the bodies, and it was just like wildly helpful. And I was like, I went there. Oh my God, I went there. I don't usually go there. I tend to like, I mean, yeah, I accept the shadow and I work with it, you know, on a psychological level, but it was like, oh yeah, I'm angry.
Yeah.
Oh wow. I would trade that person for him in like 1 second. Let's do this. I got a frying pan and an arm. You know, it's like, oh shit. That's very real. That's very real.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I have a handful I call the shadow artists because they came in to show me something really ugly or really painful that I didn't want to look at. So yeah, that comes in and out. It comes in and out. There were revelations like all the time. And just like I'm throwing so many names at you. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Watch afterwards with a dictionary, but like the Bronte sisters, these great Gothic authors who lived up in Haworth, up in the north of England. They, you know, they lost all half their siblings to horrible diseases. People died at the age of 20 there. Life expectancy was 27. And, you know, like they had such hard lives. And they wrote these incredible novels, right? And I was like, I don't want to write today. I lost him. I'm really sad. You know, I was feeling really bad. And these three sisters came in and went, you lost one person. They were like, and you weren't there to like bury the body and clean up the goo. Basically, they didn't say it like that. They said it beautifully. I was like, yeah, but it really hurt. And they were like, right, you have no excuse. If everyone's dying around you, if everything's falling apart, you still create. And they really bullied me in such a wonderful way. And they did. They made incredible games and imaginary worlds when death was at their doorstep. Death was like pinning their hems to the floor. They were trapped in a parsonage on a moor in the coldest, dirtiest, sickest part of England. And they were like, and what's your excuse today?
Wow. You know, that really hits home because I had a client in a few years ago who is I'll call her a suicide specialist.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So she sits with people in their darkness who are feeling suicidal. And we were talking about the rising cases of suicide in the region and where she's working and whatnot. But she had this young man who had come to Canada, and he was experiencing a lot of mental health stress. And she contacted the family to see if there was a history of mental health issues in the family, to know kind of what she's dealing with, whatever. And the mother said, you know, we've lived through war, we've lived through poverty, we've lost our family, we've lost our friends, we've lost some of our children. We don't have time or the privilege to think about our mental health. Ooh. And I was like, wow. Wow, that hit so deep because I sit and know, what's this thought mean and what does this emotion mean and everything like that. And as you're talking about these sisters, it would have been very much that same experience of, we don't have time for grief right now. We need to start looking after the next sibling, or we need to take care of this or worry about our own death that's going to happen by the time we're 27.
Yeah, and they did not last. And the amount of artists, which was kind of spooky, that died in their late 20s, early 30s, the time when he died. Some of them are right on the nose, like George Gershwin, who actually was so much like him in personality and talent and everything. And I didn't know that, he died of a brain tumor at 39. And it was just like, God, you never know that looking at the artwork. But he walked in. So I was like, let's chat. What do you have for me? And it was like, you lived like a comet, you burnt bright and you died young. And that like a few of them did.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of looking at me going, oh, you've got a luxury of food, clean water, and health. Like, get on with it in a way. But it was that loving, it was all loving. Like even the darkest, even the ones who harassed, bullied me, like poor George Bernard Shaw trying to get me out of bed on day 4, like shaking me out of the sheets, Eliza Doolittle, My Fair Ladying me, trying to get me to wash. Do you know what I mean? It was all love, but some of it felt quite harsh at the time.
Absolutely. Now, one question I always ask for my guests right at the end of the show is, if you could give the world one piece of advice, what piece of advice or what wisdom would you want the world to know right now?
Yeah, right now. I mean, the word that comes right to my head is creation, and create at all costs, especially right now, especially like if we're in this time of gestation for this new world that has to come. And I think people are forgetting to create what they'd want the world to be. I think everyone's really focusing on what they don't like. And I'm like, can we all just be creators? Can we all be artists and build this new world that will come after this gestation, this pause, this challenge, this transformation? So make something, anything. and put it away for a bit. If you don't like it, put it away, come back to it, or give it away. Just keep making, keep creating, keep seeing, and we'll create something beautiful together, I think.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Aoife, for joining us tonight. And I do look forward to the final product. I know we've got quite a few more chapters to work through at this point in time, but would be happy to share when the book is finished.
Yeah.
So that way the viewers will be able to grab their own copy of it.
I'll start performing it, I think, in the new year. So
awesome. Will that be like on a Zoom?
Podcast, I think. Podcast or a Zoom. Yeah. So
beautiful.
And we can talk about the artist or draw with the artist or make something with the artist. It'll be fun.
Awesome. Well, send me the links for that when you've got them ready and available, and I'll get those posted.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Aoife. Thank you, everyone who joined us here tonight. Next week, we have joining us Danielle Sennhauser-Hughes, who's going to be talking to us about sleeping well holistically. So I look forward to that conversation. And it kind of goes along with what Aoife was just talking about, right? So beautiful. All right. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you all.